I'd like to start with a quote from Deepak Chopra that I feel is very, very inspirational and speaks to our message. Your true self cannot be squeezed into the volume of a physical body. Your true self cannot be limited to the span of a lifetime. Your true self pervades and transcends both space and time. A blended NDE that I love by Clark Brawley and Lee Thornton. It seemed impossible that I could be loved and accepted just as I was in that moment, released from the burden of self-punishment, embraced in the wholeness of this forgiving presence. I was enveloped in joy. I seemed to become transparent, the light of divine love flowing through me. Since that near-death experience, it has completely changed me. I'm not judgmental anymore. I can't live in fear anymore. I don't hate myself anymore. I don't beat myself up anymore. I am gentle with myself now. Because I know from my own experience, I would love for all of you to know what we experienced. And we will start with Christine Clawley, who is a psychotherapist and a family services worker. And she has a beautiful message of linear time and the near-death experience.
Hello, excuse me. I didn't realize I'd be speaking first. I'm a little nervous, so thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you being here and just being open to these, messages that we're bringing. So my story started out, I was living in Boulder, recent college grad, and I had actually had, I was having repeated nightmares. So I take the approach with psychotherapy that dreams are kind of messages from the subconscious, and they often can pick up on things ahead of time that the conscious mind tends to block out. So my story starts with I was having these dreams, these repeated nightmares that I was being strangled, very disturbing. I would wake up in the middle of the night and, just almost feel like handprints around my neck. So I had these dreams, didn't understand what they were. And then I also had a dream that I had a cyst behind my throat, or behind my vocal cords in my throat, excuse me. And I was trying to, kind of remove this cyst, heal it. Well, these dreams turned out to kind of foreshadow a really severe illness that I was about to have. So in February 2008, I had a very high fever for about 7 days straight. Went to the hospital. They couldn't diagnose or figure out what was wrong with me, so they sent me home, and I knew something was wrong. I knew I was on the verge of death. So I went home with my family. They took care of me for 2 more days. And then this rash began to form around my neck and moved very quickly down, into my chest and abdomen. And I ended up contracting what the doctors found was necrotizing fasciitis, also known as the flesh-eating bacteria. So it's a very very life-threatening illness. Given the severity of the infection and where it was located in my throat and chest, had about a 1% chance of making it. And when I had made it to the hospital, I was in septic shock, a lung had collapsed, and I do have a paralyzed vocal cord as a result of all the surgeries and also being on a breathing ventilator for so long. So I was rushed to the hospital. My family was there. very, supportive through this entire time. And I was in a medically induced coma for about a little over a month. And while I was in this coma, I didn't necessarily clinically die, but I was kind of suspended in this other dream world. And these dreams very much reflected what was happening with my body. This may sound kind of graphic, but they had to open my chest up and just continually suck out the infection. So I was aware on some level what was, happening to my body, and I had 3 very significant dreams, which I won't go into detail here for time's sake, but I do remember one very poignant dream where I, was in a very hopeless situation, and I saw my sister, and that was really my choice for returning. I think I realized how it would affect me, and just this love that transcends the time and space caused me to want to return. So upon, waking up from the coma, I had incredible challenges to overcome. I couldn't breathe on my own. It was very challenging just to, wean myself off the ventilator. My lungs had atrophied. I could not speak. I couldn't talk. I couldn't walk. I was down to about 80-something pounds. And the doctors would say, well, she's overcome it this day, but we don't know, if her kidneys will fail or liver. And so it was very kind of discouraging for my family. And but for me, I after waking up from that coma, I had this incredible will to live and this inner strength that I didn't necessarily have before. And that's what drove me. Even just, I had so many setbacks while I was in the hospital. I had suffered from a heart attack. I would make a little bit of progress and then there'd be a setback. But I really learned to kind of do the work, but then let go and really kind of surrender to the whole experience. That's one thing that, this near-death experience has taught me, is just the power of surrendering, humility, being able to, accept help from others. I wouldn't have made it through this experience without that. And prior to my experience, I was a very competitive, type A, ambitious person, and it's extremely humbling to be in a position where you're relying on nurses and your family to help, do the smallest things for you. So that was a huge lesson. And even though, I had to kind of cope with these changes, to my body, emotionally, I suffered from PTSD. I felt less pressure to kind of live up to the ideals of society, and really began kind of my own journey of being forced to honor more authentic parts of myself. Intuition, my intuition was just really increased. I was having extremely lucid, vivid dreams every night. And, prior to my illness, I'd had these warning dreams, but I was not listening to them. I didn't get the message. And after this experience, it forced me to really be, more authentic, more in touch with that part of myself that I had tried to shut out because of the pressures of, society and, images we all try to live up to. So I guess, that's just kind of briefly my own experience. There's a lot more to it, but my kind of message is, I don't know what my message is, just humility, surrender, and paying attention to these, subtle messages that come through, whether that's through kind of, you know, synchronicity, dreams, even just paying attention to what our bodies are saying. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And we have 2 more panelists, and then at the end of them telling you briefly about their near-death experiences, we'll open it up to questions that we all might have. And I know that Christine's experience also, besides surrender, brings in a component of trust. And now we'll have Joseph Miyaki, who is a young near-death experiencer. You're not a millennial, you're younger than a millennial, right?
I'm right on the cusp.
He's right on the cusp.
Yeah.
He's 27 years old. We love young near-death experiencers because we're going to see more and more of them as the months and years go by. We know that. So Joseph Miyaki from Denver.
Hi, it's good to be here. This is the first time I've really talked about this to a big crowd. Just as a question, how many people here have had a near-death experience? Okay, cool. So I think you'll resonate with a little bit of this. So I was 15 and I was in high school, and my friends invited me to play some football before finals, and I was interested, so we played some backyard football. And of course, as I was biking to the football game from my house, I didn't wear a helmet because obviously nothing was going to go wrong that day, and I'm going to be fine. I'm young. I'm invincible. And so we were playing football, and actually I was having a really, really good day. And usually I get made fun of a lot for being one of the worst in terms of among my friends, but today I was doing really well. And I went up for a catch, and I fully outstretched both of my arms, caught the football, but then my friend tackled me right in the back, and the momentum just threw my head into the ground. And I had a subdural hematoma, a traumatic brain injury. And what happened was, I remember leaving my own body and at least talking to something that was God, but I didn't see anything. Just feeling very much in the presence of that, you know, the classic shiny clouds above, I guess, just closer to the heavens. And the 2 words I heard were, "Not yet." And then I slowly went back down, and then I was knocked out, and I was also in a medically induced coma for around 2 weeks. What ended up happening was I had a brain surgery, both to take out part of my skull so that some of the brain could swell out, and then after the brain was done swelling for around 5 days, then it would go back down, and they put the skull back in, and I did rehab for probably 3 months. And I got to say, it really does change your perspective on living. So before my near-death experience, I was a bully because I was hot stuff. I'm 15. I'm the coolest one of all my friends, and I know that. And so, I was kind of a jerk. And after that, I mean, gosh, it's really easy to look at that, and I immediately said, geez, why am I even doing that? That's not good. You know, these are fellow kids of mine. Like, I shouldn't be mean to them. And so I went and I apologized to each person that I had hurt. And I said I'm sorry, and that I didn't want to be that kind of mean person to them anymore. And I think, the big thing that just keeps ringing and ringing and ringing in my own head is that, there's something really special about it. It kind of feels like being on the other side, because just as humans, we're all, well, who knows if we're all afraid of death, but death's, it's a question of humanity. It's a question of living. And so the question that now keeps ringing in my own head is, okay, you made it, so now what? Because there's this real almost internal pull to just not waste it, you know, not just to not do nothing. And so that's really, the inspiration of my work is really big, and I won't get into it too much, because I could talk for hours and hours, and you're welcome to talk to me afterwards about it. But it's just about I'm trying to crowdsource political reform, even theorizing world peace through my online website. But then I do social media marketing because I really think that there's an element of me that's about that has a need to like spread a message. And I really think, yeah, social media is not the best, but it's the tool that we have. And so we just have to use the tools that we have in order to accomplish the goals that we want. And so I guess just after my own experience, that's the only thing that I need to do, is it's kind of a responsibility to make sure that I'm giving back to the world. And so that's really the source of my work and my life now.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and it's wonderful to hear something like this from someone that is under 30 and has carried the 12 years from your NDE with you, and you'll continue to carry it with you all of your physical life. And next we have Nancy Grignon, who is a lovely member of Boulder County and B's and IANDS. Some people wonder what B stands for. It's a continuation of the Rocky Mountain Spiritual Emergence Network, Boulder Emerging Explorers of the Sacred, and we merged with IANDS since the IANDS chapter in Boulder had kind of gone underground for 4 or 5 years at least, and so we have a group called B's and IANDS. And Nancy is a very lovely and dedicated member, and she has had some beautiful experiences, and one of her mottos is just something that I think is great. Don't believe everything you think.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for choosing to come listen to us today. Thank you, Jackie, for asking me to be on the panel. I am a little different because I don't ever plan my talk. I've only come out of the closet about my experiences less than 2 years ago. I kept my life very quiet with my family and my husband, because I came into this lifetime as a very young girl, 1 foot here and 1 foot there. I am very comfortable with the formless. I'm actually more comfortable with the formless than I am with the form. As a little girl, I used to soothe myself because I came into a family environment that was not the most comfortable for me. And I would soothe myself by laying on the grass and taking myself out to the edges of infinity. So at 6 and 7 and 8, that's how I was in the world. I wasn't like the other kids. I didn't really want to play with anybody else because this really didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. There wasn't enough love here. So I was out of body quite a bit, out with the formless. I did find that I had a baby brother who, when I attached to him, that love poured through. I became very close to my brother. I basically mothered him all of my life. And I've had experiences all the way through. Some people now calling them STEs, spiritually transformative experiences. It happens to me quite often. It just happened about an hour ago. Thank you to a gentleman in the second row. I never know when I'm going to get a download, but it happens. I don't know what I'm going to talk about, but the words come out. I wrote things down. It's a joke. It's just that part of me that thinks I need to write something down and talk to you. I'll never even open this, and I know it. So yes, I had a near death when I was 18. It was years before, you're going to figure out my age right here, before Raymond Moody even coined the term near death. So I had a very high fever, a life-threatening fever that put me in the hospital. And that fever did take me out. They were putting me into a very large tub of water in this very sterile room, trying to lower my temperature very quickly. And as quick as I was out, I was back in. But when I was out, I was told that I had completed my soul's contract, and those were the words that were used, that I had come, I had finished what I had done, what I needed to do, my soul's contract. I don't know to this day what my soul's contract is. I'm guessing, but I don't know. I'm sure I'll know next cycle around. But they said, if you'd like to, we can show you a life forward. So when I left my body, I didn't do the typical near death, which is going through a tunnel of light, seeing any family members. I was immediately to a spark of light. That's how I best describe it. Everything was light, including me. There were no forms to be seen, no angels, no God, but there was everything. So I would say, yes, there were angels, and yes, there were God, but there was nothing in form. And the energy showed me, and again, remember, I'm 18. I wasn't really desiring to have children. It was an inner yearn to have children, but at 18, you're busy with other things. And they showed me a life forward with 2 boys. And those 2 boys caught me, and I said yes, so that I would be willing to come back. I have 2 boys. I have a 39-year-old and a 37-year-old, and now I have a beloved 7-year-old granddaughter. That near death, even though I didn't recognize it at the moment, it didn't come into my consciousness and my awareness till years later, was just the beginning of gifts unfolding for me. So I'm some of the typical near-death person that have, I can't wear a watch, I have to back off equipment, I'm clairaudient, clairvoyant, clairsentient, and then just in the last year and a half, mediumship is starting to appear. I don't know how or when any of this will happen. I also want to share that Jackie gave me permission to talk about something that I've never spoken about before, because it sort of is a bigger box that a lot of people don't even want to look at, and that is I had missing time. I had 4 hours of missing time. And this experience of missing time, and I didn't look at the clock to see when my 10 minutes, so please tell me, totally changed my life once again. All of these experiences have shown me that I am not just this. We all have a body, but we're so much more than the body. And when I can step away from that body, which I'm pretty good at doing now, words come through, energies come through, gifts can come through. And if I can remember, my life runs effortlessly. I've learned to surrender to what is. When I was taken out for the missing 4 hours, I won't have time to tell the whole story, but I can tell you there was a couple of things they did let me remember. They told me that my information would be veiled. There was no time. We all know that there's really no such thing as time there. Here, we're on a linear time schedule. So here it was 4 hours, but there it was like I was gone for years and years, and enough information of universities poured through me. But all of it was veiled, except for 2 things that they told me. They said, please keep your belief systems malleable. You don't know what's going on down there. When these words came through and this energy, it isn't a knowing here, it's a knowing in your cells, in your field. Cells is a finite, it's a field. And what's happened is that they told me as my life progressed, I might open a book and there's going to be a sentence in the book that's going to cause a download. I'm going to watch a movie and a scene in the movie is going to cause a download. Or I'm going to talk to somebody like I talked to Gary today, and boom, my head blew open about an hour ago and my heart just was affected positively. We are so gifted, all of us. You do not need a near death to experience the grace of who we are. When people say that we're divine beings, I don't come from a religious background. When I was, the only word I can say, I was off planet for those 4 hours because I literally could see down on Earth. I recognized that Nancy that is down there was just a limited skin suit, and that really truly who I am is connected beyond anything. When I said to the edges of infinity, truly that's who we are, all of us. For me, just surrendering to what is. Life is now, and I don't know who they are, my soul family. I don't know what words to use, but I can tell you that there is a force. There is God. I'm okay if you want to use that word. It seems a little limited to me, but that force runs through all of us, and it creates our day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience. And when Nancy thinks that she's going to write her notes down for this talk, it's quite funny. I literally laugh at myself. And I know that none of these were going to be open, and I'll just speak to you. And we all have that opportunity to just remember the truth of who we are. We are that divine spark. There's nothing you need to do about it except just be. We hear this now. Just my coffee cup at home says just be. But I'm sorry, it's really truly, I think, that simple for some of us. If we can just let go a little bit of this form that binds us. I don't know why I've been gifted with these experiences, but I can tell you I'm very grateful. I get to share and give to other people in my coaching work. I've done hospice in the past. I love helping people pass because I know there is nothing to fear. My sister passed away 4 weeks ago. Granted, the phone call came and it hit me like it would hit anybody else because it wasn't expected. But when I woke up in the morning, work had been done, and I knew my sister was in her wholeness. She started speaking to me, I can hear, and her voice, I had never heard her voice like this before. It was rich. She was really in her wholeness. And I called my brother and I said, I'm supposed to come to California and be with you. He and I were the last siblings. We've lost all our brothers and sisters, our parents, everybody's gone. And I said, if you can dance with me, if we can wake up every morning and just be with what happens, I'd like to come and grieve with you. It was 3 weeks of the most beautiful dance with my brother, listening to our sister finally being out of her addicted body that had been dragging her down for 65 years. And she was finally in her wholeness, and I got to experience that. It is beyond magnificent to know that when we do drop this body, we are not leaving anything behind. We take all of it with us and we reclaim our wholeness and connections to those that you might be missing. So I'm going to stop talking. Thank you so much for letting me share. And be well. All is well.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and we hope that we can hear more from all of our panelists next year in Seattle or any of the other IANDS conferences. And of course, they do go to our Boulder group, our Denver group, and our Colorado Springs group, and speak from time to time, and various other organizations that we have that are interested in hearing their story. And as you can see, the stories are varied, but the themes are very much the same, that your true self pervades and transcends space and time. I think we'll go ahead and open it up for some questions. And I have a question of the panelists first. And then we'll open it up for anybody that wants to go over to the mic over there. Dr. Kenneth Ring mentions that there is a loss of a fear of death as well as a greater appreciation of life. There is also a transformational change in attitude and values. There is an inclination to love and to help others. So if any of you want to speak on those, Dr. Ring's main themes of what happens to people after they have had a near-death experience.
I'll just grab it real quick just because. Love, absolutely. The challenge for me is it's just a 4-letter word. It's like God, that's a 3-letter word, and it's so beyond anything of that word. So love is the one thing that got me through my childhood when I was not happy to be in this body and I really wanted to be back home. So for me, love is it. If, like last night, I listened to Dr. Dawson, and he said if his book helps one person, he's good. That's how it is for me. If I speak to one person and they get anything out of it, I'm totally good because we get to love one another.
Yeah, I definitely, after my experience, had kind of no more fear of death, absolutely. And once you kind of live side by side with death almost for so long every single day, I didn't know whether I was going to live or die with each breath. You know, I was struggling, and ironically, that's when I felt the most alive, you know, in my entire life, because you realize the true preciousness of each moment, of each breath. I think so much of the problems in our society really do come from this fear of death and this denial of suffering, in a way, because you do need both, and maybe there is really no difference between life and death as we've kind of come to understand it. Death has a way, existential psychology, this is kind of one of their perspectives, is that death immediately puts everything into perspective. You aren't as consumed with the trivialities, you know, of the way things should be, and you really learn to relinquish control. So that's something, you know, I continue to struggle with, you know, and living and making a living, but I definitely have a much wider perspective, and just like Nancy, you know, you realize the value of just willing to listen to someone else, putting aside your belief systems for a moment and truly trying to understand someone, no matter how different their perspective is. So it really does, change your perspective on time, change your, deepen your sense of compassion and empathy. And so even though it seems like on the outside such a negative, terrifying experience, I would not ever take it back, because it's taught me, empathy and compassion that I don't know if I would have gotten that message in any other way. So that's kind of my explanation.
I completely agree with having a big shift. I remember as I was in the inpatient recovery, just walking, I would just walk in this park that was it was just this little grassy thing right outside the hospital. And a lot of times I would just walk and think, and it was the first time I really started even caring to talk to God. And before that, I said, I'm not a religious person, and whatever, that's for other people, and I'll make my own way through life. But after having this experience and considering myself pretty lucky, it immediately made me much more of a religious person and much more of a devout person on a daily basis. And I guess that's just one thing that I'm really grateful for. The second element is that, when you're a kid, it's really easy to what's the word for it? Like, I had my parents, but I wasn't really grateful for them. They're just there, whatever. They take care of the house, and I get the food. Yeah, exactly. And it works out. And it's their job anyways, so who cares? But what it made me realize was, oh, wait a second. I have fantastic parents, and they're so loving. And it was after. It was when my dad was speaking at a hospital gathering because my healing was so great. There was like an event to celebrate it. And when my dad spoke, it was the first time I ever saw him cry. And I just, only loved him more and more after that. And so the second big shift was that kind of having a love for my parents. And there was a third thing, but now I cannot remember it. So, yes, that element. Then there was something else, but it's in the clouds, and maybe an audience question will help answer it, but we'll see.
Okay, we are going to open it up now to any of the group that's here in the room. If you'd like to ask any of the panelists a question from what or all of them at once, or whatever you would like, and anything that they spoke about. I think this is an incredible trio of Colorado near-death experiencers.
This is for Christine. You said you're a psychotherapist. Do you ever feel like maybe some people may be guided to find you and for special problems? And the other was that you said, although empathy in general is good, Dr. Hamilton, who was a regular surgeon, wrote this book, and he said he made the mistake that he connected too much with his patient, and when the patient died, he was told later, well, this was a Native American, and or wait a minute, one of his associates was a Native American. And his father had been a shaman, and he came in and he says, you're so connected to this child that died that you prevented this child from advancing into the world. So do you have to be a little careful with empathy in that?
Great questions. I absolutely do think that there is kind of a natural timing to things, and that the right people find me at the right times, and also vice versa. Therapists know this very well. Whatever kind of personal issue you're working on or a lesson you need to learn, you'll attract a patient as well that will help you kind of work through that problem. So the therapeutic relationship is a very dynamic thing. And, many times in professions, we think of kind of this structure of being in a position of power, but the therapist is very much influenced as well by what's happening with the patient. And the more aware you can be of that relationship, the more awareness you can bring, the more possibility of insights and learning for both parties. And as for the question about empathy, I do think you do have to be careful, and with, any therapists know boundaries are important. However, having an NDE experience, it does kind of shatter all those boundaries, which, I often will have, intuitions about clients at certain times, or dream about things that are happening in their lives. But I guard those insights, and I present them in the right time and at the right moment, because you don't want to you don't want to shock people, and you know, sorry, I'm a little I'm trying to think of how to kind of word this, because while boundaries are important, I think, as kind of Nancy was kind of alluding to, in a sense, there really are no boundaries at all. We are all connected, and so much of society is designed and based upon enforcing, you know, these rigid boundaries and categories and identity, and it is scary to kind of transcend or erase some of those boundaries. However, it does have to be done with ethics in mind and awareness and sensitivity. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but that's the best I can do right now. Thank you.
Okay, and any other questions here? If you'll stand up at the microphone.
Hello. I'll try to be concise. I don't know if all of you have any information on this, or any of you, but I would say I'm concerned about the future of this earth. As I read a lot from different sources, we're probably at a time of a shift in consciousness that needs to happen. It can come about in a highway, and if it doesn't, then it's going to come through a very suffering, difficult way. And a speaker at this morning was saying that IANDS has gone together with 8 other organizations trying to make this happen. And you know, of course, we have a big conflict. Religious looks like maybe even religious war might happen. So if you have any insights on what's happening and maybe how people can influence it in a positive way.
Yeah, I've been hearing more and more people kind of mention what she just mentioned in terms of society feeling like it's on the edge of some shift, and then there's even some clock that's like a doomsday clock that's very close to midnight, and the minute hand always gets closer and closer. So now I'll jump a little bit into my work, but so one of the projects that I have on my website is called the World Peace for 24 Hours project, and what that's about is understanding. Well, I guess it's giving more evidence to the concept of danger, because like if we just say, oh, well, the world is in danger, okay, now I'm scared, but now what, right? And so there's an element of, well, we've got different wars being fought right now, and in the end, they're not being fought by mystics or magicians or anything. They're being fought by people. And so I think if we can start to understand the people that are perhaps perpetrating wars and understand, well, what do they want and can they get it, then perhaps there's some solution in terms of kind of geopolitical conflicts. But in terms of environmental conflicts, honestly, I remember George Carlin and one of his jokes where he just says, you know, there's like this Earth Day thing, but the Earth is going to be fine. And, you know, it's the people that are screwed. But just because the Earth, you know, it's a big, massive thing that tends to take care of itself. So I'm not really sure, but I trust the Earth will be fine, and yeah, it's more the people side of it.
Just one more comment. That's a wonderful question, and I think with any negative experience, that is an opportunity to wake up, to face these fears, and instead of just going along with the program and acting habitually, and you know, again, acting within these limited identities and nationalities and belief systems, putting those beliefs aside for a moment and opening up the dialogue, trying to look at these issues that maybe don't want to be talked about, you know, the mass armament of, you know, not only other countries, our country, and being able to self-reflect, take some responsibility, and look at these difficult things, look at the shadow aspect of society, all these issues, because if we don't face them, they're going to build up and become larger and larger until we do. And hopefully we don't have to have a collective near-death experience in order to have this broader perspective and this spiritual understanding.
Yes, there are several near-death experience researchers here who are interested in a particular question. And that is, when you have a near-death experience, you are experiencing a kind of heightened or spiritual experience not of this world, and you come back to your body. And there is, at least we've heard from some NDEers, that there's a kind of twilight period here where you're in your body, yes, but you're kind of back there also. And then you're in your body and maybe you're here, and then you're kind of back there. And just, if you could describe, all of you actually, if you have had anything like this, what it was like in this, and how long did it last that you were in and out and so on?
I'm 63, and it's been going on for 63 years.
You had your NDE at 63?
No.
At 1? I mean,
But no.
0?
At 18. No,
Yeah.
at 18. But that experience of being, going in and out, of being in the form and being in the formless, for me, has just been happening since I was first dropped into this form. So it's a little bit different.
Oh, so you had a kind of spontaneous shifting in and out.
I do quite often.
And with your near-death experience, was there any enhancement of that, or was it like just
I believe that's when probably my gifts started to come, was after the near-death, because I don't really recall having, except for the knowing that I was not from here, that this wasn't all of who I was, and really the majority of me was, all I knew was way out there, the edges of infinity. There are no edges.
Right.
So I think the gifts that came from the near-death started to appear, to hear, to feel, to sense after that, after I was 18. And they do nothing but grow literally every day. I sit in silence a lot. That's where I'm the happiest, was when I'm quiet, or I'm in the trees. I mean, I've hit all the trees outside here. So for me, that's happens quite often.
Okay.
Yeah, I know a little bit about what you're talking about, and how I remember it going kind of in and out was while being on drugs at the hospital, and just sitting in my bed typically, and just every time a nurse came in my head, I always thought, oh, it's another one of God's angels coming by. I mean, obviously it was a nurse of a hospital, but really, I mean, in my head the whole time it was just, sweet, another angel coming to help me. Awesome. Everything's working out really well. So, yeah, you know, it wasn't any kind of extraterrestrial thing, but it was certainly like that thought of having like an outer or extra experience kind of in the present world.
And did that ultimately dampen down and you're back and you don't go back?
I don't know about that. I mean, I guess as I think about it, it just, I guess, solidified my belief in, you know, whatever we want to call the above.
Okay.
Just because it happened.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a similar experience with Nancy. In a way, the near-death experience kind of blows the doors open and erases this boundary that especially Western society has kind of put up between this reality and perhaps this other more expanded reality. But once that door is open, at least from my experience, it's much easier to kind of go in and out, and it happens spontaneously. And for me, I'm an avid dreamer. I always pay attention to my dreams. It provides absolutely crucial information, sometimes life-saving information.
Right.
And that's something that everyone has access to, but I believe we're conditioned to kind of repress that or explain it away because of this overemphasis on perhaps linear time, rationality, and this devaluation of the intuitive and these other non-verbal experiences. So for me, it's kind of been a continual thing. Certainly right after the experience, it was very difficult to cope with because I was receiving lots more information, much more empathetic. Now I feel like with my training, learning, reading more, I have a much better handle on navigating that day to day. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm not a near-death experiencer, but I don't know what brought me to NDE and got me interested, but it's been for a while, and it resonates in every way. I feel it's more real than anything that I've experienced. The one question I have, though, you know, when you talked about your sister, and she died, and how whole she was and grateful. She had addiction prior to that, and she suffered. She must have suffered. And what I wonder about is with your insights, you know, I mean, I understand death, and I can rejoice for people who've died, but I still have a hard time with people who are suffering and just how do you reconcile that? That's it.
I would love to speak to that. My sister was addicted since she was 16, suffered beyond that anybody should suffer. And she cut me out of her life for quite a while because I was pretty clear with her with what was happening. I wasn't willing to just play the game, and so she didn't want me around to mirror to her. But I recognized after she passed and she started to communicate with me, which it's much easier to communicate now that she was out of her body, much easier. She was playing a role here. She played the most magnificent role, the best addict you could ever see. I mean, it was just amazing. And she said to me, I played a spectacular role, didn't I? And I'm like, it was an epiphany for me to recognize, because I had to reframe how I've been holding my sister for 63 years. I've been holding her as an addict and a sufferer. And now I got to reframe that now, and I hold her in her wholeness, that she was here playing a magnificent role. I don't see her, well, she's not suffering any longer. And I'm not saying that she didn't suffer when she was here, but I don't have to hold her that way anymore. What a gift for me not to feel that pain that I was feeling for so many years. Why am I so blessed and she is suffering? It was hard for me. Why am I so gifted? I have such an incredible life, and she's suffering, but now I recognize it's a role that she played, and she played it for me. She played it for me. In my world, it was just for me. It's my lesson and my gift.
Thank you so much, and I hope you'll know that you come back to Colorado, you'll not only see beautiful scenery, but you'll hear some beautiful messages from many of our people here. And it's time to close. If you have any more questions, I'm sure any of our panelists would love to get together with you out in the hallway.